done.
Welcome back. The time is 8:30 on the dot, and you're still tuned in to News and Views with myself, Salailo Makwidiri. And we're going to be moving on into a very important segment of the show. It's called #Africa Focus, where we hone in on the latest on the continent, some of the issues that need an eye and that need attention. And we're going to be focusing, I think, on a region of the continent which, for the longest time, has experienced a lot of instability. The Horn of Africa, which is once again teetering on the brink of war, rising tensions between Ethiopia and Eritrea, and unresolved grievances from the Tigray conflict, which I think you might remember. Resulted in the deaths of thousands and thousands of people, and also just geopolitical rivalries over Red Sea access have created a volatile situation that could ultimately spiral into a full-scale conflict. I think what was interesting for me was Lieutenant General Satgan Kebrentisai. He warned that the war is inevitable, and the question remains: is another devastating chapter in the region's history unavoidable, or is there still room for diplomacy? And to help us unpack the unfolding crisis and what it ultimately means for regional stability, we are joined by Abdirizak Muhumed, a PhD research fellow at the Society, Work and Politics Institute at Wits University, and an expert of governance and conflict in the Horn of Africa. Is coming to us all the way from Nairobi. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Abdirizak. Really appreciate you giving us your time this morning. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Thank you for having me, bro.
The pleasure's all ours. I think we can kickstart the conversation with just setting the scene. The Horn of Africa, that region, has seen, I think, for the longest time, recurring cycles of conflict. How do you assess the likelihood of another full-scale war between Ethiopia and Eritrea? And secondly, what could be some of the key factors, the key driving forces behind this new, renewed escalation?
Yeah, thank you. As you said correctly, the Horn of Africa is a laboratory of conflict for students, historians, and even political commentators. The conflict is rising, the tension is rising. And this time round, even though the latest round is about Ethiopia, the likelihood of Ethiopia and Eritrea going into war, but you might remember Eritrea has been part of Ethiopia and got its independence from Ethiopia in 1993. From there on, Ethiopia and Eritrea went into war in 1998. And that war continued until 2000, when Algeria mediated between Asmara and Addis Ababa. And with the political change and TPLF, or the Tigray People's Liberation Front, that mainly dominated Ethiopia's politics, losing power in 2018, Abiy unexpectedly, the prime minister who came to power after long protest, unexpectedly went to Asmara and signed a peace deal. And there was a great hope that at least that conflict has come to an end. But then it didn't. Now the current talk about war revolves around Ethiopia's ambition, a long-held ambition of getting access to the Red Sea. And it is also in relation with the Tigray region that the Ethiopian federal government has been at war with since November 2020. And Ethiopia sees, or at least views Eritrea as a destabilizing actor, an actor that meddles in the internal affairs of Ethiopia. And Eritrea views Ethiopia as an aggressor a kind of a colonial power that has not given up it, or that at least denies Eritrea independence and pulls Eritrea into accepting to give Ethiopia a corridor, and that's where the conflict now stands. Will the war break out? I think, given Ethiopia's internal turmoil, Abiy is not ready to go into war. Ethiopia, like Eritrea, is run by uh, one person. So there's the parliament, the other forms of institutions. There are no checks and balance that, for example, in Ethiopia, that could say Abiy cannot go to war. So it depends on the whims of the prime minister, but I don't think that he has the will. Might be there, but I don't think that the internal politics of Ethiopia. Ethiopia is greatly divided. There is a war in Tigray. There is war in Oromia. There is war in the Amhara region. So Ethiopia is virtually more like into a civil war now. So going to war into Eritrea is not now, I think, a presentable idea for the prime minister, but the tension is still there. I don't think there is a tension, but there is no imminence of war as we speak.
Mm, mm, mm. I want to touch on a piece of South Africa's involvement in trying to maintain and keep peace in the Horn of Africa region. I think it was back in 2022, if I'm not mistaken, when the Ethiopia Tigray Peace Agreement, or AKA the Pretoria Agreement, was signed. It was supposedly going to be the cessation of hostilities, and agreements between the two governments, the Ethiopian and the Tigray's people. But it almost felt like Eritrea was largely sidelined in the Pretoria Agreement. How much of the current situation stems from, Asmara, the capital of Eritrea, feeling almost excluded from the region's political future?
I think that's the view of Tigranians. Eritreans do not view the Pretoria Agreement as part of Eritrea's either foreign policy or internal policy. But Eritrea was largely accused of interfering or taking part in the internal war of Ethiopia, siding with the federal government of Ethiopia against Tigray. So that was the accusations made against uh, 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 Eritrea. Of course, Eritreans deny. But Tigray is a kind of a very important geopolitical region in terms of in terms of considering the source of the conflict. Ethiopia fears that the Eritrean regime might use Tigray as a kind of a proxy to overthrow the current prime minister. And that fear drives the accusations and counter accusations. So there is a great fear from Addis Ababa that Sias Afwerki, the president of Eritrea, might use or might consider using Tigray as a battleground, arming them against the current prime minister or arming them against Ethiopia. That is a fear. But on the other hand, there is this larger geopolitical, if we leave the internal affairs of Ethiopia, there is the greater ambition of Ethiopia. Ethiopia's military generals, the chief of staff talks about, or the foreign ministry, getting access to Red Sea is mandatory. Remember, I think we talked about on this show, Ethiopia signed an MOU or memorandum of understanding with the breakaway region of Somalia, and that sparked diplomatic hostilities. Ethiopia and Somalia withdrawing each other's ambassadors, and later on, with the mediation of Turkey, that at least did not escalate into an armed conflict. So there is the tension of the Red Sea, but Tigray in this case is just a smaller factor in instigating this type of violence. What we also need to point out is that Ethiopia also accuses Eritrea of helping the rebellion in the Amhara region and the Oromo Liberation Front, or an armed group that's also fighting in Oromia. So there is an internal conflict in Ethiopia, and the fear is that Eritrea might use that internal divisions, internal conflicts, and helping armed groups in Ethiopia against the current government. That is what is driving this hostility. Combine that with the wider issue of the Red Sea.
I want us to take a quick break, but when we come back, I want to touch on the geopolitical influences and how external actors like the UAE, like Egypt, and other Gulf states, how their involvement could ultimately shape the conflict dynamics. But we'll touch on that after the short break.
Right.
Salam Media, your spiritual companion this Ramadan.
For all your gold jewelry requirements, from custom diamond pieces to gold investment coins, there's only one name, Randery Jewelers. Visit us at 151 Stephen Dlamini Road, Musgrave, or stay informed by following us on Instagram and Facebook at Randery Jewelers, the family name you can trust.
More than 800 million people around the world live in deep poverty, uncertain of where the next meal will come from. For those on the brink of starvation, a food pack means survival, dignity, and hope. Send food. Send kindness. Be the reason a family does not go hungry. Donate now to Islamic Relief.
Yasin Badat Financial Advisory. Are your financial goals feeling out of reach? Yasin Badat Financial Advisory is here to turn your aspirations into achievements. Our dedicated team, armed with a history of success, is ready to guide you through the complex nature of financial and investment planning. Whether you're a seasoned investor or new to the game, our personalized solutions cater to your unique goals and risk appetite. Trust in our commitment to transparency, integrity, and excellence. Ready to unlock a world of financial freedom? Partner with us today. Call Yasin Badat Financial Advisory at +27 33 346 2071 or visit www.yasinbadat.com. Yasin Badat Financial Advisory, guiding you to financial success.
Our brothers and sisters in Palestine are enduring unimaginable hardships. Ashraful Aid teams are on the ground, delivering crucial aid to those in need. But we can't do it alone. Palestine is suffering and they need your help. Your support can make a world of difference. Visit www.ashrafulaid.org today and donate to bring hope, relief, and healing to those who are in need.
When the perfect blend of stylish decor, exquisite halal cuisine, and warm hospitality come together, it could only mean Al Bayt Lodge, your true home away from home. Al Bayt is the ideal heaven for families, business people, and tourists, with its 4-star family rooms and other luxurious facilities, conveniently situated close to Port Elizabeth Airport, the beach, and other amenities. Your stay will be truly unforgettable, as you'll be taking home lasting memories of the warm hospitality, the serenity and tranquility that Al Bayt has to offer. For reservations, call 041 583 6415 or visit www.albaytlodge.co.za.
You are listening to Salam Media live from our headquarters in South Africa. This is Salam Media, keeping you company this Ramadan.
Welcome back. You're still tuned in to Salam Media. The time is 8:45, and we're really glad that you're still joining us right here on your spiritual home during the month of Ramadan. And we're still having the conversation on the Horn of Africa, which is once again teetering on the brink of war, and the tensions between Ethiopia and Eritrea continue to unfold and to escalate. And this is over unresolved grievances, particularly from the Tigray conflict and the geopolitical rivalries over Red Sea access. And we're still talking to Abdirizak Muhumed. He's a PhD research fellow at Society Work and Politics Institute at Wits University, and a researcher in governance and conflict in the Horn of Africa. Abdirizak, thank you so much for staying with us. Before I went on that short break, I wanted to touch briefly on the geopolitical influences that might come into play here. You have external actors in this, almost Cold War conflict that is currently happening. You have the UAE involved, you have Egypt involved, and you have numerous other Gulf states that have also shown interest. How could these dynamics, how could the involvement of these foreign actors shape and influence the dynamics of this conflict?
Yeah, you're right. Egypt has an interest in the Red Sea. It is one of those countries that are on the Red Sea, geopolitically and geographically. But the United Arab Emirates is kind of an external actor that has a huge influence, and its interest lies in two things. One is the interest in investment, and in this case, investment in boats and harbors on the Red Sea, and its ambition is to have a say on the trade that goes on the Red Sea. But Egypt is quite different. Egypt's interest lies in the River Nile and around the Ethiopia's Renaissance Dam. So Ethiopia is building a dam for what it calls economic development, and Egypt sees that as a kind of an existential threat, because the water levels will go down, and Egypt depends on that river mainly. And they say Egypt is the Nile and the Nile is Egypt. So that is where Egyptians are coming in. But the United Arab Emirates in this case is different. It's helping Ethiopia. It's financing Abiy's grand kind of a projects. It has even pushed it's accused of pushing the previous MOU between Somaliland, the breakaway region of Somalia, and Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed of Ethiopia. So in one way, you have UAE, whose main interest is economic investment, who is also in this case helping the Ethiopian government, at least the Prime Minister, to somehow secure a corridor on the Red Sea. And that corridor is to be invested or jointly invested by the United Arab Emirates and the Ethiopian government. But the problem is Ethiopia somehow tries to enforce these rhetorics, or at least escalating them. And the countries like Somalia, Eritrea, Djibouti, countries that are on the Red Sea, think that Ethiopia is kind of attempting to annex part of their territory. But the reiteration of Ethiopia's side that they want to get access to the Red Sea through peaceful means, and at the same time contradicting that with rhetorics of we must get a corridor or we must get access to to the Red Sea by all means is also interpreted that Ethiopia is somehow preparing for a war. But the internal conflict of Ethiopia, the division within, the ethnic nationalism that is at all time at its highest point, is, I think, what is currently preventing Ethiopia to declare any war or to annex any part of the Red Sea. But I think it's a conflict that is, as I said at the beginning, that is likely to escalate. But at the same time, escalation might remain at the level of political rhetorics. I don't think Ethiopia is able to wage any war economically at this stage. And with this internal division, it might only lead the country's breakdown. And I think the Ethiopian policymakers have that in mind. So they are trying to push their geopolitical interest without, I think, going into war at this stage. But as you said, Egypt is a player. And in this case, actually, when tensions rose between Somalia and Ethiopia, Egypt was seen as Ethiopia, in this case, sees Egypt as an opponent, just the way it sees Eritrea as an enemy. And Egypt was accused of helping Somalia. And Egypt is also now part of the troop contributing countries to Somalia's peacekeeping forces. So it is a wider geopolitics for Egypt. It is mainly its own interest in terms of water levels and in terms of what it sees as existential threat as a result of Ethiopia building a dam and the water levels of the River Nile going down. And for the UAE is mainly an economic and geopolitical influence.
No, interesting. Having all those players coming around. But I have a few questions, but this next question I want to boil it into one question. It's about two questions. Firstly, we know that the West has its focus elsewhere. There's a lot happening. They're probably focusing on Ukraine and what's currently happening in the Middle East with the ongoing genocide against the people of Palestine. Can we expect any kind of meaningful intervention from them, or will they remain, almost passive observers like they currently are? And if that's the case, the African Union, they have struggled when it comes to enforcing the Pretoria agreements. What are the structural limitations preventing it from playing an effective role? And given Ethiopia's influence over the AU, can the organization realistically act as a neutral mediator?
Yeah, I think these are good questions, but loaded questions. So let us start with the aspect of the West, the possibility of the West intervening here. I don't think the intervention will be meaningful, and this is because they were not able to stop the Tigrayan war, the war between TPLF and Tigray People's Liberation Front and the Ethiopian federal government. That war dragged on for close to 2 years, and apart from diplomatically loaded statements, there were no tangible and meaningful interventions, even though there was some sort of pressure put on both TPLF and the Ethiopian government to sign the Pretoria Agreement. But even in the implementation of that agreement, we have not seen a meaningful intervention, either from the African Union or from the Western countries. AU generally has not been able to stop any war in this continent. So in that regard, I think it is a kind of a toothless continental body. It is interventions are mainly diplomatic. They don't have a standing force to deploy. And Addis Ababa, as you say, is the seat of the regional body. So they don't press Ethiopia too much. They don't push the Ethiopian prime minister too much. I think they can do a lot more than they are doing now, but I don't foresee any change in their current policy towards Ethiopia or in taking a strong stand against Ethiopia. For the West, they have been quite in this regard. I think the West is more, as much as they are consumed by the war in Ukraine and the Russia conflict. The West is a bit more influential than AU on this continent. So in terms of even providing humanitarian assistance, in terms of trying to stop the war, in terms of engaging diplomatically. But AU, even its activities, even if they are doing much, is largely invisible. It is not, AU in this regard is not on the front line in terms of stopping conflicts in the continent. But I think structurally, as you said, AU depends on, they don't have an economic kind of mechanism to sanction either of the warring parties, so they don't have this economic leverage, and if they have, they don't use it. Or they don't have a standing military army that can be deployed to stop the conflicts. And the relationship between individual African countries is not as good as, for example, the relationship between a country, one of the Western countries and one of the African countries. So even though AU is there, African countries are not that much connected, either financially in terms of trade and movements and that stuff, or in terms of common agendas. So I think we will not see, or will not expect much from AU. There might be a possibility of pressure from the Western countries in terms of issuing threats. You know, one way, one aspect that sometimes becomes effective is economic threat. Ethiopia's current economic status is really not promising. There is high inflation. Ethiopia even went into default, could not even repay its debt. So it is a lot of economically African. The AU does not have a card to play, and militarily it doesn't. So it only depends on diplomatic engagements, and diplomatic engagements may not be necessarily, if there are no other leverage, if there are no either a carrot or a stick to use, might not themselves be effective in stopping the war. We might expect a bit of pressure from the West, but not that in itself also might not be, if we were to take the Tigranian war into account, might not be effective in stopping a war between Eritrea and Ethiopia.
I think we're going to leave on that note. Abdirizak Muhumed, thank you so much for giving us your time. And I think it's a bit sad that the African Union is increasingly being proven to be literally toothless and very, very ineffective when it comes to dealing with a lot of issues that are plaguing the continent, especially the conflicts. I think you and I are going to be chatting in the not so distant future, but we're going to leave it here for now. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Salelo.
There you go. That was PhD Research Fellow at Society Work and Politics Institute at Wits University, and is also Research in Governance and Conflict in the Horn of Africa, Abdirizak Muhumed, giving us, I think, the latest on rising tensions in the Horn of Africa, a region that has been plagued by instability for a very, very long time. I don't think I remember a time where there was ever peace in that region, and it looks like there might be a threat of war between Eritrea and Ethiopia, mainly because of the Red Sea and access to the Red Sea. But I think largely because of Eritrea feeling almost, sidelined after there was that brokered peace agreement, the Pretoria Agreement, which South Africa was very, very influential in drafting, and it looked like it favored Ethiopia at that time. So it's going to be interesting how that situation unfolds in the Horn of Africa, and I will definitely be giving you the latest on that front. So yeah, stay tuned to Salam Media. We're going to take a short break for now. News and Views will be back after this.